Well, I hope you're keeping count at home because Goldman Sachs was fined another $5 million for risky mortgage investments during the financial crisis, specifically selling these so-called mortgage-backed securities and leading investors to believe they were sound and fine and without a hint of trouble. Turns out that that was not the case. But it's just the tip of the fine iceberg, in case you're counting, $115 billion now. Fox News correspondent Elizabeth Brand with the money that adds up, but the help that doesn't necessarily follow. Elizabeth.
Yeah. Isn't that right? Hi, Neil. It's a settlement years in the making. Goldman Sachs executives have agreed to pay that $5 billion in settlements for shoddy mortgages agreed upon between 2005 and 2007, leading up to the devastating financial crisis. So let's break down the numbers. The settlement includes approximately $2 billion in civil penalties, a $1.8 billion fine for borrowers in communities directly affected by the housing crisis, and $875 million to federal and state entities. Goldman admitting that for a time period, the employees knew there was problems with mortgages being sold to investors, but they didn't relay the information. So critics are outraged that no one person served jail time for the illegal activity. Do you ever wonder where all this money goes? We checked out the trail after the nation's banks doled out $110 billion in fines. Naturally, thousands of homeowners did see checks, but if you look a little bit closer, in New York, they got some new stables and a barn for the annual state fair equipment. A New Jersey mortgage firm collected $8.5 million for reporting banks' misconducts. And Delaware, well, local police there got subsidized email accounts. But according to the Wall Street Journal, roughly $50 billion ended up in the pocketbook of the United States government. The trail on exactly what that money was used for, however, does turn up cold. Neil, back to you.
All right, Elizabeth, that's fascinating. Thank you very, very much. So you got to ask yourself in the end, what was this for? What is all this money for? And do you notice someone or any entity left out? Believe me, we're no apologists for the banks and the big money center guys. But the very folks who emboldened them and told them to lend, and look at mortgage lending and look at mortgages, period, as a birthright, not just a goal, they're free and clear. Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. The real perpetrators of this, these are the quasi-mortgage agencies that have a foot in the government water and the bureaucracy water. They were not only left out of any punishment, but they get billions of this money. Charles Payne of Fox Business Network fame, that sounds like rewarding the fox guarding the henhouse.
It really does, Neil, and you wonder why this resonates, why everyone points to Wall Street and their shenanigans on both sides of the aisle now. Keep in mind, for his 2008 run for the White House, President Obama received almost $300 million from Wall Street. That is a lot of money in the aftermath of the worst financial crisis in our lifetime, that no individual is going to prison for this. And it feels like there's this sort of, there is this sort of incestuous relationship, particularly between Goldman Sachs, Wall Street in general, Goldman Sachs in particular, and Washington, D.C., where people go from Goldman, they become big time in the government, whether it's Treasury Secretary or other jobs, and no one ever goes to jail, and they get to use the shareholders' money to pay these fines, and it's a relationship that goes on, and to your point, it seems like bad behavior is rewarded. Both sides of the aisle are guilty about it, and then people have just sort of washed their hands of the whole thing.
Yeah, and their stocks go up in the meantime. Of course, it's been a tough quarter for banks in general with other concerns globally. But having said that, believe me, I'm no apologist for these banks. They're greedy as you know what, and they will take advantage of any leeway given to them. But when they're encouraged, indeed, practically ordered to lend more and to do more to increase home ownership, then they're going to do it, and they'll find crafty ways to package and collateralize what they do, hence all of this.
Right.
But where were the punishment for the Washington folks who were pointing the fingers? They're too busy gathering the loot.
The punishment, on the contrary, most of them feigned ignorance or were appalled at these actions. How dare these banks provide these mortgages for people who couldn't afford them? You made them do it. Starting with the Community Reinvestment Act, when the federal government threatened these banks, saying, listen, you can't do interstate, across-state business if you do not lend money to certain people in certain neighborhoods. That began a long time ago. Bill Clinton, though, put it on steroids. By the way, think about this. Every president, one of the biggest feathers in his cap, has been able to say home ownership went up under my watch.
Absolutely.
Fannie Mae became the sort of Yucca Mountain, if you will, toxic mortgages, repackaged, and everyone kind of knew the deal, and everyone looked the other way.
But what's sad is, Elizabeth was pointing out, a fraction of this money, if you argue that a lot of homeowners were hurt or those who bought these securities were hurt, into financial relief for consumers, just a fraction under under 3% of all the money's raised.
Yeah.
Where the hell is the money going?
A lot of it goes into the general fund. You know, a lot of it goes into Treasury. Justice Department takes their cut. You mentioned Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac earlier. It's been a free-for-all. You can imagine pirates splitting the bounty or the loot, if you will. It's just amazing. And I got to tell you, to me, you know, it feels like something is not right for Wall Street not to have fought this and to continuously, every time I look up, just 3 months ago, Goldman was paying a $5 billion fine.
I know.
They keep paying these ridiculous fines, and you say, why? And you've got to scratch your head and wonder it's because no one ever goes to prison. Everyone's getting paid except the people watching this show.
Yeah. It beats jail time, doesn't it?
It certainly
All right.
does.
Thank you, my friend.
Thanks
Charles
a lot, Neil.
Payne.